Hi, I'm John Freitag. I'm with All American Hospice. I'm here with Allie Mazza. She's the owner of Brandywine Concierge.
Yep. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Allie. And I was talking to you earlier about this. You've been ahead of the curve doing these videos for a while now.
Yep.
Pretty much since you started your business. How long has Brandywine been around for?
Yeah, since I started the business, August of last year is when we officially opened our doors. And you're right, I started with videos pretty quickly because, like you and I have said before, I think so much of what makes somebody want to do business with you is getting to know them as a person. And the best way for people to understand what my business is to see who I am and what I care about. So video makes it a little bit easier.
Right. So how did you even get into senior healthcare?
Sure. I went to Westchester, and when I was in between undergrad and grad school, I responded to, this is like gonna maybe make me seem older, but a Craigslist ad that was like looking for a caregiver for an older guy, and I was like, I could do that. Was not studying anything related to geriatrics or gerontology. I was in a psych major, and I was going to grad school for communications, and I responded to this ad, started doing companion care for this older gentleman in Westchester, and absolutely loved every minute of it. And then when I went to grad school, I couldn't keep doing it. So I started staffing the case with my friends, and they'd come out and be like, he's grouchy. That was awful. Don't ever make me go back in there. And I had this light bulb moment where I was like, maybe this senior living industry is something I want to pursue. So I had been recruited to a company out in Wisconsin, and I kind of told myself in the back of my head, I still have until I'm done with grad school. If I can find something in the senior living industry before October, then I'd love to do that instead. And October 1st, I got a call from Brightview and moved to Maryland and was an activities director for 3 years for Brightview. Loved every minute of it. Loved the company, loved the job, but I needed something a little bit more challenging. So then I did a year where I did home care, sales, and business development. And then from that point on, the rest of my career was really as a sales and marketing director inside the communities. And at different types of communities: independent living, personal care, assisted living, memory care, the whole spectrum, some that were standalone, and a lot of it in Maryland. And then when my husband and I moved back up here to Pennsylvania, I was a sales and marketing director, and I saw this need for there to be somebody that was kind of going to be almost like a independent, not unbiased, either sister or daughter.
Yeah.
Or almost kind of like a real estate agent, like a showing agent that when you go to places knows the right things to ask, is going to help walk you through the process, but can do so in a way that is empathetic but also level-headed with an industry experience behind them. So I kind of work as a facilitator for not just the family, but also the community. I help the process go a little bit smoother for everybody. So that's how I started the business back in August.
That's a good way that you put it, though, trying to teach people and ask the right questions, because I think we sometimes take it for granted. We're doing this stuff every day, so I deal with hospice every day. You're dealing with, senior placement every day. Sometimes we might take for granted that this is brand new. This is the first time for someone. So
yes. Absolutely. And I say this all the time. So if anybody's ever watched my videos, they're going to be like, oh, broken record. But, when you go to buy a house, most of us would not do a for sale by owner unless we had some sort of real estate experience or somebody that we could refer to talk to. Most of us would trust a real estate agent because it's a big, complicated transaction. But then when we get to the point in our lives where we now need to make a decision about housing for our loved one, who has been the person that's cared for us our entire life, and then put on top of that the fact that they now have a care need where we don't really know what that care need looks like or how to pay for it and what's going to be the best fit. It's this very complicated situation. Plus there's the emotional baggage of now it's this role reversal sort of thing that people say, where now you feel like you're her mother or whatever. And that's a lot to take on yourself. And if you don't know the right questions to ask, and you don't because you don't work in the industry, to take it on yourself is backbreaking. It'll be like a full-time job. And that's why it takes, I think, so many people so long to finally make that decision, because they want to make sure that they've seen everything. They want to make sure that when they make this really big, important decision, they're making it based off of the right information, but they don't even know where they're starting. So.
Right. And I love how you do it all inclusively, because I think lots of times people might think that someone who's doing this type of service is just taking people out for tours, and it's a lot more than that. Right. So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, you said you're educating them on the financial aspect. You're educating them on maybe even the disease process, on how they're going to progress.
Absolutely. You know, the reason I picked the name Brandywine Concierge is because I want people to, like, when you go to a hotel and they have a concierge desk, the idea of the concierge is that that person or that like service is going to be able to really provide information on this wide array of services related to where you are. And that's what I want people to feel like when they call me. So if you call me and you don't even know that I help primarily with placement, you just have a really hard time communicating with your mom with dementia, I can walk you through that. Or you call me and you need hospice or you need home care, I can get you connected with the right people for that. So I want to sort of be a resource and a hub, but a lot of times my process when somebody is looking for placement for a loved one involves sort of the like, okay, unload it on me emotionally so I can know where you are and where your mom is or whoever, like what's going on, what's the stuff, the heavy stuff, so that I can help carry that for you. So my process is kind of like, I'll do usually an initial call with whoever's going to be a primary decision maker and whoever's going to do most of the legwork, the touring and things. So usually that's the adult daughter. And we'll do a phone call where she kind of explains everything that's going on and I get most of the information. If I can, in times pre-quarantine, I like to go to the home and do a home assessment of the person so I can get a sense of how they live, who they are, what does their home feel like, what does their day look like. Nowadays, that's a little bit harder. So when all of this started, I rolled out a program that includes a client profile that I have my clients complete. So it goes through things like, you know, what's mom's background, what financial sources do we have to pull from, what other services might we need? Do we need some help figuring out the financial side? Do we need some help figuring out like emotional or psych services for mom or for you? It also has them identify what's going to be the hardest part of this for your loved one, what's going to be the hardest part of this for you. And then there's this fun section where it says, okay, here's 4 or 5 libraries from senior living communities in the area. It doesn't say where they are. Out of these 5, which one do you picture your mom in? So it's kind of like a BuzzFeed quiz, you know, and it gives me a basis that isn't equivalent, but gives me a starting point so that I kind of feel like I know what they're like. And during normal times, I go into all of the communities that I partner with once a month and I lead a program. So I get to know their residents. So that way I can match personalities too, not just aesthetics.
That's great. So you're going more than just geographically or financially. You're actually trying to figure out how the resident will match up. Yep, personality.
Yeah, because a building is a building. And there are so many, we are so lucky. We have so many beautiful senior living communities. And aesthetics matter to the point where you want somebody to feel comfortable. But then the people in that building, the people that work there and the people that live there are what's going to really make it a success or a flop. Right. So if I'm going to narrow it down, and I try usually to narrow it down to like 4 communities or less that we're going to go out and actually visit.
Why do you narrow it down? So you don't overwhelm the person?
Yeah, because, and honestly, usually I know out of those 4 which one's going to be the one.
Right.
But you want to be able to see a cross section. So I usually try to at least, unless there's only like 2 that are going to fit financially. But I usually try and schedule between 3 and 4 visits based on everything they've told me. And sometimes I get it wrong, but most of the time I can narrow it down to at least the top 2 and usually the one that I think that they're going to like the best. Based off of how much information they're willing to share and how much information I can get out of them before we really start the process. But yeah, and a lot of it, you know, I said this to you earlier too, a lot of the process is sometimes getting the person to change the mindset of what this whole thing means for them and for mom or dad or whoever. Because so often we think of it, or I hear the language like, we have to put mom in a place or we have to put her in a home. And that's really, I know language seems small, but it's really big. So yeah, like saying
the resident, the person who's actually picking their life up and moving it into a facility, how do you keep them involved? Because lots of times I feel like it's just the adult children making all the decisions. Mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes when they come to me, it's like, well, we're not giving her a choice about this. So if we're power of attorney, we can make this decision without her, right? I had that conversation with somebody the other day. That's the wrong mindset to come into it with. The right mindset is to go to her and ask for her input, regardless of whether or not she's cognitively impaired. So often people just assume that they're going to do what's best for mom and then mom's going to get on board, but they forget that mom's an adult. So an easier way to have that conversation is to go to mom and say, you know your person, of course, but go to her and say, listen, Mom, we're starting to see X, Y, or Z, or Mom, when we start to see X, Y, or Z, how do you want us to handle it? What's your plan? I really, really try and get my clients to go to their parent or whoever it is and say, what's your plan? Because you want them to have some buy-in.
Right.
And the end goal, and this is so important to me, the end goal of somebody moving to a community should be a new chapter. It shouldn't be like the close of something. It should be the beginning of something. So I'm really, really big on advocating for a role or a job at a community. In fact, oftentimes when we tour, I already have in mind something that I think could be their job at the community, but I bring that up during the tour. For example, so like if a gentleman, guys especially, when you think about what goes on in your life, and a lot of these older guys were the main provider for their household. They had big important jobs, and now their kids are out of the house. They are now selling the house that they worked so hard to pay for. They don't have a job anymore. So all these little pieces of identity have been chipped away at. And this kind of feels like it's a decision that's not theirs, and that's kind of saying they're no longer able to have the autonomy over their life.
Right.
So instead, we can say to them, listen, this community heard that you used to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They need somebody to run this organization with, resident council or whatever it might be. They are really looking for somebody that has your personality characteristics. Do you think you could do that if you ended up moving here? So that not only do they feel important, but they get a role, because that's so, so critical to making this something more than just a physical place where somebody lives. So a lot of the time that I'm spending with these families is kind of helping to identify what is that thing that's going to make mom or dad or whoever feel important and valuable, and like they have a reason to wake up every morning.
Right. No, that's awesome, the way that you're able to match them up. I know you talked a little bit that you dabbled in realty for a little while, and it's a merger of the two roles of being a great real estate.
Yeah. I was in a real estate office for 6 months as marketing. I'm not a realtor. I have a lot of respect for what they do, but I did marketing for a real estate office. And yeah, a lot of what a realtor does is kind of like help you imagine like a lifestyle. I know when I moved, I live in Kennett Square. And when we moved up here, I thought I wanted to live in Westchester, and we were looking at houses, and I was like, couldn't find the right one. Finally, my realtor, after getting to know me well enough, looked at me and she was like, Allie, you want Kennett Square. I know you now, and that's going to be the place you're going to feel comfortable. And if she hadn't said that, I think about it all the time because I love where I live. So sometimes that's kind of what I'm doing, is saying, yes, we could look at X, Y, and Z, but I'm telling you, after knowing you and knowing what the options are, this is where it is.
That's great. Yeah, that's so cool how you're able to do everything and just keep, getting the person comfortable with the whole process and keeping them involved. I think is amazing. It's a big part that I think is often overlooked. So that's great.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So how normally you'd be going out and touring a lot of facilities with families. How are you doing it now with
I miss yeah, that's my favorite part of my job, because I've gone to these places so many times, and every time I go it feels different because I'm with a new family. So and it's like kind of like it's like a choose your adventure story. You know how you can go through the same chapter, but it can have a different ending. I can go to a community with two different families and have totally different experiences based off of who they are and what they're looking for. So I miss that, but we're being creative. So, and I know you are too, the industry doesn't stop. People still are aging. People still need a safe place to live. And a lot of families are now seeing, since either they're home with mom, or now that mom is home and they can't get to her as easily or whatever, they're saying, oh my gosh, I think now is the time that we need to make a move. Or if they have more time themselves and they're starting the process because they have the time. Yeah. And we're doing a lot of FaceTime virtual tours. So that's working. When I first did it, I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get a real sense of the community on a cell phone. Right. But I was really surprised how well you can. Now, the one thing I'll say is that some of the communities where they have residents that are like self-quarantining or, social distancing, you don't see as many residents. You don't see the normal activity levels, but you get a sense of the atmosphere. You get to meet some of the staff. And usually if you're working with somebody like me, I've already narrowed it down to about 4 places that are going to fit the person anyway. So even though you don't get to see the personality of the community in that way, that it could possibly be a fit. So I'm doing a lot of these FaceTime tours.
That's great. That's great. Is there any way that you've gone and found a good way to like sort of plant the seed on the whole conversation about moving into a facility? We talk about trying to, I guess, get people involved before it's an emergency, before it's like the last second. You work on Facebook a lot with this stuff, which is, I guess, the demographic of the adult children. Lots of people in their 50s and 60s on Facebook nowadays. Are you able to reach out to them ahead of time, like 6 months or further ahead of time, and get them engaged?
Yeah, I've had, most, like you said, most of the people I deal with are adult children, but I have some clients that are looking for a community for themselves. Maybe they're in their early 70s, some of them in their 80s, whatever, they're looking for themselves. And I think all that's going on has kind of shown a light on how difficult it is to live independently when there are even more restrictions on that, and just even safety concerns and fears. So I think some people are saying now, like, oh, if I were in a community, I wouldn't worry about going to the grocery store because the meals are provided, or I wouldn't worry about, my safety because there's a nurse 24/7. So that has been a good way to bring it up with people that are looking for themselves, or that have been resistant to the idea and but are now ready based on all of that. A lot of what I've been talking about with my clients is, listen, you have a global pandemic that you can blame this move on. Because so often it's like, oh, we're going to wait until she actually needs it. And I hate that, because you really need it before you need it.
Right.
But what ends up being need ends up being like a fall or something. And if we can avoid that and blame it on something that's outside of our control, it maintains dignity, because you can say, listen, Mom, we can't be with you because of this pandemic. We want you to be safe. And you can even say, and I know a lot of communities will help you through this, listen, it's a respite stay. Right. You don't have to live there permanently, but we would feel better if you went and stayed at this place for the next 30 to 60 days.
Yeah, give it a shot.
What usually happens with a respite is that they move in, they love it, and then they don't want to leave.
Right.
So almost all communities are allowing that right now.
That's great. And it's funny you even brought up like someone falling. So someone, for example, if they move into a personal care home before they have a big fall and go into the hospital and they're in a sniff or something, I mean, they could skip that whole step because they'd have an extra sets of eyes on them. They'd be able to do other things without having to worry about, going out shopping and doing all those things. So
absolutely. It's, if you move to a community before you need it because of something that's like a triggering event, not only are you healthy and going to live longer in that community at that primary level of care, but you also have more time to form relationships so that your move isn't traumatic. Because if you couple a move with something like a medical event, it's a total shift, because it's not only a new living environment, it's a new living status. Right. So if you can shift that to 6 months before that's going to happen, or a year, or what I wish would be like 5 years before it's happening, and move into independent living, you can have those 5 years where you have medical supervision, you have increased activity level, you have increased socialization, which we know benefits people in the long run, health wise, not just cognitive wise.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this, because I think lots of times there's just a misnomer that you're just giving tours. That's it.
No, I wish that was all I did, but no.
Yeah. So it's definitely all inclusive and very holistic.
And it's free. So everything I do is free, which sometimes I get looks like, no, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. I'm really transparent about how my business model works, and I think most people that do stuff similar to me are, but I have partnerships with the communities in the area, and they're more than happy to pay me for helping with this process. So I'm compensated from the senior living communities, so my clients pay me nothing.
That's great. That's even better.
Yeah, right.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add, like anything you wanted to share with everyone before we hop off?
No, this is great. I just want to thank you, because it's wonderful what you're doing. And I think it's great that we have this platform now, that people are feeling more and more comfortable with, sharing on video, and you're doing a great job of connecting with a lot of different professionals. So
thank you.
Thanks for including me.
Thank you. Thanks for being involved.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Allie.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
And I'll share Allie's LinkedIn, and I'll share her page for Brandywine Concierge and everything on the links below. Great.
Wonderful. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.